Up until this point, we've dealt with cash flows that occur either at the beginning or the end of the timeline and happen only once, which are considered lump sum one-time cash flows, or we've dealt with cash flows that have a repeating pattern where you have the same exact cash flow over and over again. In reality, we may be faced with cash flows that don't really have distinct patterns like that and don't have just single lump sum payments. So here's an example where we've got a series of cash flows and we're supposed to draw the timeline for the cash flows. So we have year 0 with a cash flow of minus 50, year 1 with 100, year 2 with 75, and year 3 with a cash flow of positive 50. If we were going to be calculating the present value or future value of this series of cash flows, we couldn't use the normal 5-time value of money keys on our financial calculators because our payment key, that PMT key, is designed to handle cash flows that are the same, repeating over and over again. And in this case, we don't have that sort of pattern. So to compute the present value of an uneven stream of cash flows, we have to add up the discounted present values of each cash flow. And so you see the formula here, which really is just a repeated application of the present value formula that we see earlier in the chapter. Earlier in the chapter, we see that the present value of any given cash flow is the cash flow that occurs at some future point divided by 1 plus our interest rate to the nth power, where that future cash flow occurs in n years. So all we're doing here is using this same present value formula and applying it to a series of cash flows that occurs over time, where the series of cash flows basically looks like this. So we have a stream of uneven cash flows represented in our timeline here, and we want to compute the present value if the annual rate of interest is 10%. So if we're going to do this sort of calculation without our financial calculators, what we're going to have to do is look at each individual cash flow and do something to push it to the very beginning part of our timeline. So at time 0, our cash flow is 0, and that's already at the beginning of our timeline. So we'll move to time 1, where the cash flow is 100. We want to use this present value formula to get the present value of that cash flow. So what we're going to do is push that back to the beginning of our timeline by dividing by 1.10 to the first power. Because it occurs in year 1, we're moving it back 1 year on the timeline. That would get us $90.91. Our next cash flow that we want to get a present value of is this 300. So we want to move that back to the beginning part of our timeline. And now we're moving it back 2 years, from year 2 all the way to year 0, 2 ticks down the timeline. So we got to divide that by 1.10 squared. Divide that by 1.10 squared, you get 247.93. Now we want to move back the $300 cash flow in year 3. And we're going to do a similar calculation, but again, we keep changing the exponent to account for how many years we're moving along our timeline. So divide that by 1.10 cubed, you get 225.39. Then this last cash flow is minus 50. And we have to divide that by 1.10 to the fourth because we're moving from year 4 back to year 0, so we're moving 4 time periods back on our timeline, and you would get negative $34.50. $2.15. Once we've done that, we add up all of the cash flows that we've taken the present value of, and you get a total of $530.08. So the present value of this series of cash flows is $530.08. Now, while we can't use the typical 5 time value of money keys on our financial calculators, we still can use some keys on our financial calculator to perform this type of present value calculation. The keys that are going to be important to us for this calculation are the CF key, the NPV key, and some of the other keys that you see up here. So looking back, if we look back at our timeline and we want to use our financial calculators to get the present value of this series of cash flows, the first thing that we're going to want to do is hit the CF button. And when you hit the CF button, you want to clear out what this is referred to as the cash flow worksheet. You want to clear out this cash flow worksheet. So hit second function, and then clear down at the bottom left. You see that means clear out the worksheet. Now we're starting off with a clean slate. Any cash flows that were stored in our calculator's memory are now gone. Our cash flow at time 0 is just 0, so we're going to hit 0 and then push enter. Then we're going to hit our down arrow. And you see next it's asking for C01. Our cash flow at time 1 is 100. So we can hit enter. And then you see F01 here. We're going to leave that as it is. We're going to leave it at 1. Because what we're telling our financial calculator, if we leave that at 1, is that the cash flow of $100 occurs only one time, which for us, it occurs once at year 1 and it doesn't occur again. So we don't have another $100 in the following year. So we're going to leave that at 1. C02 asks for the cash flow at time 2, and that's 300. So we're going to type in our 300 and we're going to hit this enter key. Now we have two options here. This $300 cash flow happens 2 consecutive years. So what we could do is tell our financial calculator F02 is 2 and hit enter. And effectively what we've done is told our calculator that we have a $300 cash flow that occurs in 2 consecutive years. And so that's going to incorporate the cash flow at time 2 and the cash flow at time 3. So now it asks for C03, and we would type in our negative $50 cash flow. So we type in 50 negative and hit enter. Realize there's a little bit of a mismatch in this being C03 and this being our cash flow at time 4, because what we did previously said that our we told our financial calculator that the $300 cash flow happened for 2 consecutive years. And so because we do that, this is considered our third distinct cash flow that has no pattern to it. Then F03 you see is set to 1, which is exactly what we want, because this negative $50 cash flow happens only once. Now the alternative way that we could type those cash flows into our cash flow worksheet, I'm going to clear out the old cash flows and start off with new ones. The alternative way that we could type this in is just to type in all of the numbers directly, CF0 being 0, C01 being 100, leave the F01 at 1, C02 is is 300. And if we leave this at 1, we can type C03 as 300 directly, and then type C04 in as negative 50. And you see our C0 or our F04 is set equal to 1. So the first step really is to enter all the cash flows into the cash flow worksheet. So you hit that CF button and you hit second function clear down at the bottom left, and that clears out all of the old cash flows in your cash flow worksheet. The first way that we did this is we had CF0 and we entered the number 0, hit enter, and then we scrolled down once. C01 came up the screen and we typed in 100 and we hit enter. We scrolled down once and F01 showed up on the screen as 1, and we didn't change it at all, so we just scrolled down. C02 shows up on the screen. We typed in 300. We hit enter and scrolled down once. And when F02 showed up, the first thing that we did was we told our financial calculator that this cash flow occurs for 2 consecutive time periods. So we set F02 equal to 2, then hit enter, scrolled down once, and then we told our financial calculator finally that the last cash flow that we had was negative 50. The alternative way that we did this was type in all of the cash flows individually directly, and so the alternative way that we typed in our cash flows, the first step is the same. Hit the CF button, second function, clear. We put in a 0 cash flow for year 0, scroll down. C01 comes up on the screen, we enter it as 100, hit enter, scroll down. F01 we left equal to the 1 that it showed up on the screen, so we don't have anything else to enter, we just scroll down. C02 we put in as 300. We hit our enter key, scroll down, and this is where a difference came into play. F02 equals 1 showed up on the screen, and rather than changing this to 2, we left it equal to 1, and we scrolled down. So now when it asks for C03, we needed to enter the second $300 cash flow, hit enter, scroll down, and then F03 we're going to leave set equal to the 1 that showed up on the screen. So now we enter C04 as the time 4 cash flow on our timeline, and that's negative 50. So the first way, we're telling our financial calculator the same thing, but we're saving ourselves a little bit of typing by telling it that the $300 cash flow occurs 2 years or 2 time periods consecutively. In your calculator's memory, the version on the left and the version on the right is the same. It's picturing the same timeline. So now we've got our cash flows entered into our timeline, or our cash flows entered into our cash flow worksheet. We're going to hit our NPV button. You hit the NPV button, it asks for an interest rate, and that's the 10% interest rate that was given to us in the problem. So hit 10 and then hit enter. Then you scroll down, it's telling you that you can compute the NPV. NPV shows up as 0 because we haven't hit compute yet. You compute NPV and you get 530.09. So once you get through entering those cash flows into the cash flow worksheet, the next step was to hit your NPV key. Once you hit your NPV key, I equals shows up on the screen. You want to enter 10 and hit enter. Then scroll down, you hit your compute button. NPV shows up on the screen as 530.09. And that's the present value of that series of cash flows. This number is 1 penny different from our calculation using the formula. The reason it's different is just because of rounding in these steps that we did in here.